Hello everyone, welcome to Inconvenient Truths. I'm your host, Jennifer Zheng. Today I will talk about the CCP's two-way bet on the US election. Why didn't the CCP congratulate Biden immediately after the media announced that he was the winner? How did the CCP do their calculations? Who the CCP really supports and why Chinese Americans are so passionate about this election? So make sure you stick around till the end. While leaders from many countries, including Canada, Germany, France, and Taiwan, sent their congratulations to Biden shortly after he announced victory on November the 7th, the CCP was notably absent from the party. 2 days later, on November the 9th, the CCP's Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin responded to a question about the US election at his routine press conference by saying that we note that Biden has announced that he was elected. Then he added that we understand that the results of the election will be determined in accordance with the laws and procedures of the United States. When being asked when China would congratulate Biden, Wang replied, China will follow international conventions to deal with this. In the meantime, the CCP's mouthpiece Xinhua only published a 3-line report. Did you notice his wording? He said, we note that Biden has announced that he was elected, which means it is Biden himself who announced victory. Also, when pushed by the reporter, Wang Wenbin refused to say when or whether the CCP would congratulate Biden. Instead, he said, China will follow international conventions to deal with this. 4 days later, on November the 13th, again at the daily routine press conference, when being asked by the media, Wang Wenbin said that China has been following the domestic and international reactions to this US presidential election. We respect the choice of the American people and we congratulate Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris. In the meantime, we understand that the results of the US election will be determined in accordance with US laws and procedures. This time, Xinhua published a 2-line report. Did you notice that Wang didn't use the term president-elect or vice president-elect? He used Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris when he congratulated them. What amazed me was when the Voice of America did a report about this, they just recklessly replaced Ms. Harris with Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, which means the Voice of America added something that was not there in their report. Although they put it inside a bracket, it is still not acceptable according to professional standards, as it is the reporter's stance or opinion, not what Wang Wenbin meant to say. On the contrary, Wang Wenbin tried very hard not to use president-elect or vice president-elect in his reply. For me, the report of VOA is a perfect example of fake news. Anyway, this is a little bit off the track. Let's go back to the CCP's response to the US election. After November 13th, there have not been many updates regarding the CCP's official stance on the US election, except a fake report from Foreign Policy saying that Chinese President Xi Jinping called US President-elect Joe Biden last Friday, nearly a week after he was declared winner of the November 3rd election. There are no other media, English or Chinese, reporting about this, so I guess this is a fake report. Nowadays, you really can't trust those so-called mainstream media or organizations anymore. When you read their reports, you really need to be very careful and very critical. So, if we compare the CCP's response to this US election with that of 2016, we can see clearly several very obvious differences. 1. 4 years ago, the CCP took the initiative to send a congratulatory message the day after Trump's election, whilst this time, 6 days after Biden claimed victory, the CCP only passively and reluctantly said that it congratulated Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris when pushed by a reporter at a press conference, and then added that in the meantime, we understand that the results of the US election will be determined in accordance with US laws and procedures. 2. 4 years ago, the congratulatory message was sent in the name of Xi Jinping, representing the highest level of the CCP's recognition of the US election results. This year, however, the congratulations was from somebody at a significantly lower level, a spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not even the minister himself. 3. 4 years ago, the CCP's media report about the congratulatory telegram was 281 words. This year, the report was only 110 words, less than half of the length of 4 years ago. In other words, this year's congratulatory message is not as important as it was 4 years ago. 4. In 2016, Xi Jinping sent a formal diplomatic telegram to congratulate Trump on his election and to express his wish for the future of the US-China relations. This year, the CCP's congratulations was expressed verbally at a press conference without any mentioning of visions or wishes for future relations. 5. 4 years ago, Xinhua's news title was, quote, Xi Jinping calls to congratulate Trump on election as President of the United States, unquote. This year, its title was, Foreign Ministry, congratulations to Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris. Please note that this year, the CCP only congratulated Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris without mentioning what was congratulated. The word president does not even appear in the news title or the congratulations. So we can even understand it as congratulations on their success in stealing the election, right? So now, why does the CCP take such a stance? Here are some of the reasons. Reason 1. Purposely creating an impression that the CCP doesn't care much about the results of the US election and that the CCP hasn't got itself involved in the US election or has in any ways interfered with the US election. So, in other words, to purposely keep a distance not only with the results of the US election, but also with Biden. Why does the CCP want to create such an impression? They have many reasons. 1. Right before the election, there had been explosive reports about Hunter Biden's laptop gate. Evidence not only from Hunter Biden's laptop, but also from his former business partners Tony Bobulinski and other sources showed that Biden's family gained billions of dollars of investments, as well as dry shares that could be worth hundreds of millions from the CCP. If you don't know what a dry share is, please go back to check my program, How Has Biden's Stance on China Changed While His Family Businesses Developed? I made that program before the election. To put it simply, a dry share is free share, free money you get for free. The CCP knows too well that this scandal, although almost all the so-called mainstream media choose to cover it up, is still up in the air. So by choosing to keep a distance with Biden, the CCP really wants to hide this scandal. At least they don't want to remind anybody by showing too much enthusiasm toward Biden's self- and media-claimed victory. 2. Before this year's election, U.S. intelligence agencies had repeatedly owned that the CCP, Russia, and Iran were attempting to interfere in this election, and that CCP wanted Trump to lose so that the CCP could have a chance to end the trade war and high tariffs and turn the tide around. In addition, before the election, large amounts of fake U.S. driver licenses and documents from China were seized, including nearly 20,000 in Chicago, thousands at Cincinnati Port in Ohio this year, and nearly 3,000 in New York last year, etc. These are only those that were found and seized. How many have already come in without being found and seized? What is the purpose of importing so many fake IDs from China? People have every reason to believe that they could be used in this election to create fake votes, especially when in some places there were more votes cast than people. 3. Also, there are claims that the CCP has directly interfered in the U.S. election. Let's watch a 2-minute video first.
Of the Chinese Progressive Association working directly with the Chinese consulate in San Francisco, worked with a whole network of these groups in the key states. I'm talking Texas, Florida, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. They set up groups specifically in these states to work inside the minority populations to flip these states. And they were very, very successful. Communist Party USA, which is also pro-China, and they have done massive voter registration drives in these states. They have signed up hundreds of thousands of voters, and they claim that they claim in their own writings that they won the election for Biden. They claim that they flipped Michigan, that they flipped Wisconsin, that they flipped Arizona. They boast about this. So these are pro-Chinese organizations working with the Chinese Communist Party to flip states. 7,000 volunteers. In Arizona, they made 8 million phone calls. They knocked on 1 million doors in Arizona alone, all generated by pro-Chinese communists. So they are just going out there on the ground, door knocking, phone banking, voter registration, shipping people around in buses to get them to vote at the polls. All perfectly legal stuff, but it's operated in the interests of communist China, specifically to elect Joe Biden, who they love, and to destroy Donald Trump, who they certainly do not love. So we talk about foreign involvement in elections. It's going on under our noses.
The above statement was made by Trevor Loudon at a webinar called The Chinese Communist Party's Crimes Against America and the Rest of the Free World, hosted by Committee on Present Danger China on November the 10th. So these are some of the reasons why the CCP wants to purposely keep a very low-key profile with the US election, especially at such a sensitive time when there are a lot of disputes and even lawsuits going on surrounding the election. Reason 2. The The CCP was afraid that Trump would impose more sanctions on the CCP. It is no doubt that President Trump's trade war and tough stance against the CCP hurt it a lot. As recently as November 12th, after the election, the Trump administration just issued an executive order banning U.S. investments in 31 Chinese companies, including telecom firm Huawei, China Telecom, and China Mobile, all very important big military-linked companies of the CCP. Regardless of whether Trump is re-elected or not, he still has time to impose more sanctions on the CCP. So the CCP doesn't want to annoy Trump at such a sensitive time. Reason 3. Maintaining a relatively neutral position in case Biden ends up not winning, so that the CCP won't be that awkward if things do go that way. The CCP's spokesman said that we understand that the results of the U.S. election will be determined in accordance with U.S. laws and procedures. This means that the CCP does know the election is not over yet, so it doesn't want to openly side with Biden too early, just in case. Or perhaps exactly because that the CCP has either been involved in the cheating or knows a lot about the cheating. It knows that the results are still up in the air, so it doesn't want to openly congratulate Biden yet. Reason 4. Before the election, many disgusting photos and videos of Hunter Biden doing drugs and sex were circulated on the internet. Although we do not yet know who took those photos and videos, we do know that some of them were taken in China and that the CCP must have a lot more in its hands. In this sense, plus the hundreds of millions of bribery money we mentioned before, the CCP has all kinds of leverage over the Biden family. To corrupt officials is a basic and very effective tool for the CCP to threaten and control officials to force them to do what it wants. So, the fourth reason why the CCP did not rush to congratulate Biden in a high-profile manner is that the CCP is very confident that it can dominate future U.S.-China relations if Biden ends up in the White House, and that Biden and Harris will have to listen to the CCP. Also, the CCP's delay in publicly congratulating Biden may be a deliberate attempt to raise its profile in Biden's eyes and to remind Biden not to regard the CCP as a little brother and not to forget to take the CCP's demands seriously. To sum it up, the CCP is doing a two-way bet on the U.S. election to ensure that whoever wins, it won't end up in too much of a bad and awkward situation. Although the CCP definitely wants Biden to win, it doesn't want to show this too early or too obviously. What, in contrast with this, is many so-called mainstream English language media have rushed to discuss U.S.-China relations in the Biden era, creating a narration that Biden's victory over Trump can turn down the heat of U.S.-China relations, and U.S.-China relations can finally go back to normal or even better with Biden in the White House, and it's time for the West to revisit its China narratives, etc. It seems these media are so eager to please the CCP and more eager than the CCP to nail down the Biden victory. I really don't understand why they should do this. For me, this is disgusting. Finally, let me talk very briefly why the Chinese Americans are so passionate about this U.S. election. Many people have an impression that Chinese people are very smart and hardworking. It is indeed the case. After they migrated to the US, the majority of them just focus on studying and working hard and giving their children good education. In the meantime, they don't care that much about politics, nor do they get involved in politics that much. However, things changed drastically this time. The passion that many Chinese Americans show for this election is unprecedented. For example, the live streaming of Sound of Hope's Chinese language coverage of the election on election day got millions of views, something that never happened before. With the results pending in the air, they eagerly seek out updates every single day afterwards. Why did they suddenly become so passionate? Because the reason why they decided to leave China and to seek a future in the US is that they thought that the US could offer a better future for themselves and their children and their children's children. They didn't like how things were in the CCP's China, so they chose the US instead. They weren't that much passionate about US politics before because they felt that whichever party won who never got elected, the fundamentals of US society remained the same, so they didn't need to care that much. However, this time things are very different. Because they come from communist or socialist China, they are more sensitive to communist and socialist things, and they feel more bitter when the US is moving toward that direction, when the traditional Democratic Party is hijacked by the radical and extreme leftists. They don't want to escape one socialist country only to find themselves ending up in another socialist country. When the CCP's China is no good, they can choose to manage to come to the US. If the US, in some sense, the last safe haven they can find on earth, is also compromised, they have nowhere to go. So for them, this is the last battle and the last hope. That's why they care so much. Well, I guess for other ethnicities, the stakes and the situation are the same. That's all for today. Truth, no matter how inconvenient, does save lives. Please subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. Thank you. See you next time.